for joining us. I'm Steve Iaqueta. It's an honor and privilege to continue as your chair to facilitate these very important meetings supporting our regional transportation. Thank you. To my left is Greg. We'll go around the table. Greg Richard, Regional DOT.
I'm Kristen Diat, City of Schenectady.
John Scavo, Town of Clifton Park.
Liz Cormos, Village of Boston Spa.
Katorvik, City of Brunswick.
Joe Seaman Graves, City of Cohoes.
Andrew Kreshik, City of Troy.
Migelski, Town of East Greenbush.
Let's go around the back row.
Oh, and I'm Sandy Mislitz,
Oh, I'm sorry, Sandy.
Executive Director of CDTC.
Melissa Shannon, CDTH.
Jacob Beeman, CDTC. Chris Barry, CDTC.
Now going to the board, we see upper left.
We'll read through who's online. Jen Saponis from CDTC, Mike Valentine, Saratoga County, Mark Castiglione from CDRPC, Tony Vassal, Port, Andrew Tracy from CDTC, Carrie Ward from CDTC, Chris Kate from McFarland Johnson listening in, Don Sapos from Town of Guilderland. Ellen, I'm not sure who you are representing.
Ellen McNulty Ryan, Village of Green Island.
Welcome, Ellen. Fred Mastriani from GPI, Len Pasca from CDTC, Jamie O'Neill, Town of Malta, Laura Robertson, Town of Niskayuna. Mark jumps to the bottom, which is always interesting when Zoom does that. Mark Surdam from Town of Hoosick, Susan Barden from Saratoga Springs, Teresa LaSalle from CDTC, and Bill Anslow from Albany County. Did I miss anybody on listening virtually?
Please speak up if you're missed. The meeting being recorded, square is boxing out.
Yeah,
something.
do you mind, Tara, just kidding, got it.
Yeah, didn't touch that. That's good.
And got it. Perfect.
We are
Thank you.
recorded. Thank you very much. Happy October, everyone. As part of my introductory remarks, I'd also like to welcome new general manager for the city of Watervliet, Joe LaSabita. I believe Joe is with us virtually. You see
Was
that?
supposed to be.
New appointment. Welcome, Joe, to the committee. And that would conclude my chairman's opening remarks as item 1 at this time. Thank you for joining us. And visitor issues is agenda item number 2. Are there any visitors wishing to address the planning committee of CDTC at this time? Please raise your hand. The rest of the room. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. This is probably a shorter than usual meeting, abbreviated because we're on some notice, and Sandy will get into details of our impending workload this winter.
Yes. Yes. So,
So
we're
today
gonna
is a gift.
give you guys a quick meeting today. And we'll jump right in to the agenda items.
Thank you very much. Prior meeting minutes, administrative item 3 of August 4th. I was on virtually. I'll need a motion in a second to adopt for the official site our August 4th meeting minutes, which were distributed both hard copy and electronically. Thank you, staff, for excellent online services. The website is terrific. May I have a motion to adopt our August 4th minutes at this time? Member Precious moves, second by
Second that.
Adam Migelski. Thank you all. All in favor, please say aye, raise your hand.
I have some discussion, Steve.
Thank you, Michael. Go ahead.
On page 5, we're used to going through some, major transportation issues and funding programs and municipal interaction. And I want to take the time to look at an item of minutia and mundaneness, okay? If you look in the minutes, all of a sudden things change in the context of that page. Sandy is by first name. Andrew is by first name. Ross is by first name. Bob Rice is by first name. And it sounds out of place in representation of this body to be calling people in such an informal way in the context of the minutes. And that's the only page I noticed it on.
Okay, we'll make that adjustment. We'll put the last names in there. Thank you.
Yeah, protocol is first and last name, I believe, historically correct. First and last name for reference at all times. On Steve's.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Well
Mike.
noted, Michael. Thank you. Protocol is important, so we like to continue our consistent professional practice. Thank you. Any other corrections of note, clarifications required? This is our opportunity to make such clarifications, and they are helpful for all readers. So we're grateful. Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
And for your support. Any other comments? Motion and second made. Ready to vote? All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Are any abstaining or opposed? Hearing none. Action item 3 is adopted. Thank you. Item 4, more action items. Our running story, of course, is fiscal constraint. It went through Federal Highway Administration online, and they are overseer and watchdog for this.
They're a little late right now.
They're not available today. So I'll start off and Greg can chime in as well. So at the end of the federal fiscal year, which was September 30th, within that month prior, we take an assessment of some of the existing TIP projects to see if they're going to meet their schedule, and if not, we shift things around. And we have a second agenda item later on that we'll get into the details of that. Functionally, those are all what we call the project selection moves that don't require this body's approval. But what the changes do impact is our budget. And the packet item 4A, which I will show on screen, indicates that with the changes that were made to rebalance the books between September of the last previous fiscal year and the next coming fiscal year, led to a situation where we were out of balance with respect to our budget estimates. So Greg, do you want to explain what you and NISDOT and Glenn CDTC came up with the budget estimate proposals?
Yeah, basically we move, all the STIP performance, we move project out, which moves a lot of money programming out, and then what that does is it causes 1 year to show a large under programming, but the subsequent year show a large deficit. And since we have to be plus or minus 5%, we have to move some money around to show the balance year by year. So in the end, we are proposing to move 35 million of NHPP from year 3 to 4 of the current TIP, and then 5 million of flex and 1 million of urban. And this will balance both years, leaving, I believe, some programming capacity in the current year for TIP amendments and some doing it next year. Next year will kind of be wrapped up in the TIP update, so it's quasi, but this is the important year since it's last year to current TIP process.
Right. So the moves that Greg just described, I'll show on screen for everyone's information. Let's share screens.
Highlight the changes. This has been dynamic, and now we're seeing larger percentage changes in the 3rd and 4th year. So they're highlighted.
So the moves basically, but the 3rd year, 40% under program. Yeah, same thing. The 4th year, 70% over program. By moving the funds around, so 4% under and 3% under respectively. So
I have a question. This is basically a math exercise, or does it actually impact in the project?
it does not.
All the above.
It's a math exercise.
Okay, that's all right.
That exercise that relates to our projects,
Yeah.
how they're programmed and sequenced in time.
Because
Proposed
projects
time,
don't
future
happen
time.
the way they.
Future time is most fluid, dynamic, as we see meeting to meeting.
I understand.
But we do our very best. Best efforts are noted. Perfection can be elusive, but we strive for perfection every day and keep it in balance. So it's important to keep our eye on this ball
Yep.
for the future years. And that guides our program. That is our planning function.
And hopefully, you're seeing on screen now the impact of the change. Balancing and changing the underlying budget estimates for the 2 years, we achieved the 5% rule being over or under. So again, it's a little bit of an administrative exercise just to rebalance those budget estimates because things change over time. But we do need the planning committee's approval for the new budget estimates. So
This will be a topic for discussion before we vote. Other questions? Is everybody with us on these changes to table 4? It's been continued every meeting. that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
There's a
Glenn's doing
mistake
this.
on one of those on the handout.
There's a mistake
My
on-
mistake. Can you put the handout back up? I just want to point this out.
okay.
Thank you, Glenn Posca.
I think, Greg, you probably saw it a minute ago.
Let me share it.
All right, so as I mentioned, this is very dynamic and changed before your eyes.
Sorry, folks.
Not that, the handout.
Oh, the handout
write-up,
itself.
The write-up, I'm sorry. The table's right.
Table is correct.
In the write-up where it says current budget estimate 20-21. Those years are all off by 1. It should be 21, 22, and the next one should be 22, 20.
Okay. Yeah,
The next one's 22, 23. It should be years 3 and 4, not years 2 and 3.
Okay.
So 2021 becomes 21, 22.
Yes.
21, 22 becomes 22, 23.
And the same thing in the second part.
Got it.
Sorry, my mistake.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Glenn. That is important.
At least it didn't change the math.
I was worried it was gonna change the map, exactly. No, that's an oversight on our part.
Future time is most fluid, but we'll continue to watch the river flow.
Exactly. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. All right, is there other discussion on the voting action item 4A fiscal constraint relating to our 5-year plan table 4? Any other questions? Discussion? Everybody's got to be comfortable moving forward.
I'll make a motion to approve as shown.
Excellent, thank you.
Second.
All right, motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Is everybody comfortable? Fine. Nods. All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. Nod your head. Aye. Okay, very good. Any abstaining or opposed? Going once, twice. Hearing none, our 4A item is hereby adopted. Thank you. And 4B is the 22-23 UPWP Planning Project solicitation. And that includes linkage.
Correct.
UPWP, Sandy?
Thanks, Steve. So one of the things that we here at CDTC are looking to get the planning committee and our policy board more involved with is the planning side of our equation. We spend a lot of time at this table talking about the capital program, but we don't often spend a lot of time talking about the build of our planning work program. Aside from the linkage and some technical assistance projects, generally speaking, historically, this body hasn't had much involvement in the creation of our work plan. And so this is something that we're proposing to change for the coming Unified Planning Work Program year, which is, for those that's not familiar with that terminology, that is basically our staff work plan, in which we assign all of the planning funds that come from federal highway and FTA to planning projects in the region. In the past, we've had our linkage program, as I mentioned before. We've had some specific solicitations for regional trail projects, for freight projects, but we haven't comprehensively asked communities or member agencies, what do you think is important? What kinds of things should we be thinking about as a region? And of course, they all need to be tied back to our regional transportation plan divisions 2050 and the principles and policies within that. So One of the things we're proposing to do this year, which our policy board, we mentioned this to them at the meeting in September, and they approved this approach, was to develop a solicitation for planning projects in the region. And this would be open to any municipality, regional partners, even not-for-profit groups, if they have the approval and support of the municipality in which the project is located. So there's a variety of ways we could provide some access. And what we're really trying to gauge is what is the level of interest, what is the needs out there. And also we're shifting our unified planning work program. We've traditionally in most recent years done a 2-year work program. Because of the amount of uncertainty this year, we have a federal transportation bill that's sort of in limbo with respect to our planning priorities. We kind of have some ideas of what might be coming, but we don't know any of the specifics. We have a number of staffing changes here, which we'll get into, including myself. And there's just a lot of uncertainty around our work plan for the coming year. So we decided to do a 1-year work plan so that we have some flexibility here as a staff when things evolve over this next year to be able to adapt and respond in a more timely manner. Because if we lock ourselves into a 2-year work plan, guess what? We're just going to be coming back to amend it anyway. We figured we would try a 1 year. And I'll walk you through the document that was provided in the meeting materials in advance. As I said, eligibility would be, any of our municipalities, any member agency of CDTC. The rough timeline of what we're thinking about, assuming the group approves this today, we would issue a call for projects in around October 12th with an application deadline of November 19th. The staff would then prioritize and sort of evaluate the projects and studies and would share a draft list with this body in January for discussion in hopes of building and approving a draft UPWP for policy board approval at the February planning committee meeting. The reason why you're not seeing dates for the January, February, March meetings is related to the TIP, which we'll get into the schedule moving forward. But somehow in those timelines, we hope to be able to have meetings for this body to tackle and approve the UPWP. We're not giving a dollar value upfront for a couple of reasons. Again, we don't have certainty on what our funding level is going to be. The NISDOT typically issues our guidance on building a work plan in the month of, generally early November. In which they provide planning targets. We're hopeful that that schedule is going to be met. Along with that, we have some federal responsibilities as an MPO, of course, that we have to still figure out, whether that's 50% of our planning resources. So I don't want to give a dollar figure upfront of what's available, but in a general sense, it might be in the neighborhood of $600,000 to $800,000. 200,000 of which we're going to reserve specifically for linkage planning work, as we've done in the past. I did increase that budget level a little bit this year because the demand is still there, and the price of things has gone up. We haven't changed that value in a number of years. So we figured we would allow for a little bit higher dollar value. In terms of what's eligible, as I said at the beginning, no matter what we do, it needs to be consistent with the priorities of our regional transportation plan and visions 2050. And I've listed on the sheet here a summary of the bullets, which of course, you can read all the details about it in the executive summary new visions on our website. But they range from safety to complete streets and bike planning to transportation demand management initiatives, environmental initiatives. There's a whole range of things that we can do with our planning funds. We're seeking 3 categories of projects in this solicitation. Of course, as I mentioned a minute ago, the linkage program will have $200,000 set aside for projects that traditionally relate to the interrelationships of land use and transportation in communities, corridor planning, sub-area studies, zoning code updates, these sorts of activities. The second category is what we're terming regional plan implementation projects. And these would be projects that would implement a recommendation of one of CDTC's many regional plans. Not only do we have the Division's transportation plan, but we have the Capital Trails Plan, the Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Plan, the Regional Freight Plan, the Regional Safety Plan. So we have these documents that have a number of recommendations in them. And this would afford applicants an opportunity to make progress on implementing some of these project concepts. One of the things that we're going to limit so that we're not getting 50 trail applications and expecting to be funding 50 trails is we're only going to fund one project in a functional area category. So meaning if we get 10 safety applications, we're going to choose one project to work on. If we get 10 bike trail applications, we're going to fund one to work on. The idea to spread the planning funds to the different functional categories that we have, and that we're not overwhelming on one side or the other. And part of this is also to gauge the interest and the priorities of local governments, of our regional partners as well. Because if we do see that, we'll know for the future that, okay, this is something that's in demand, that we need to think about how to reallocate resources to, that sort of information. So we're hoping that the regional plan implementation projects will have some level of interest from the parties. And in the documentation, it links back to our website where we have all the final reports of these plans listed. We provided some examples here in the solicitation material. And again, this may range from community resiliency plans to safety plans and programs related to safety. Might have transportation related updates to comprehensive plans. We can support that aspect of a comprehensive plan. So there's multiple things that we can do. And these are just a few examples on the regional category. And then the third category is what we're terming the community planning technical assistance. And this is not unlike what we're doing with CDRPC in partnership now, but these would be the short-term, short durations. Hey, I have this issue I'm trying to grapple with in my community or in my agency, and we need a little help. Maybe it's a couple of weeks worth of staff time to help do some sort of traffic modeling exercise. Maybe it's some general community planning, some design assessment, some safety assessment, whatever technical assistance that has a transportation relationship you can think of might be eligible in this particular category. In the appendix, we do have a list of examples, many of which are consistent with what you would see in our CDTC RPC technical assistance program. We're still going to reserve the opportunity to apply for technical assistance throughout the year. So that technical assistance program with CDRPC is not going away. This is just going to be complementing that and seeing what we might have up front in a broader solicitation in a more formal way. So those are the three broad project categories. The ineligible activities, obviously we can't fund construction, we can't do detailed engineering or surveying. So there are some limitations in terms of what's eligible, but pretty much anything that's conceptual planning, looking at the feasibility of an idea would likely be eligible for this activity. In terms of budgets and local match, we are proposing that for the linkage program, we're going to increase the maximum project cost to $100,000. That ceiling hasn't been lifted in probably 10 years, so we're bumping that up a little bit. We're changing how we're doing our local match requirements here. So we're actually going to be changing and benefiting, hopefully, the local government partners accessing the linkage program. We're reducing the match requirement to either 10% cash or 10% in kind. We're really hoping that this will generate interest from communities that might not have resources and have had access to the linkage program in the past. So we give an example here. If you're asking for, and you do have 10% cash, your request would be for $90,000 in federal funds with $10,000 in cash. If you're submitting for in kind, you'd ask for the full $100,000 in federal, and then the in kind would supplement the matching requirements we have on using federal funds. which is something that goes on behind the scenes that you folks do not need to worry about. It's tricky.
Force account for staff.
Correct.
Staff time. document.
Correct, exactly. And then for the other two project categories, similarly, we're going to ask for a 10% in-kind or cash match for the regional plan implementation projects. And then for the community planning technical assistance program, we're only asking for 10% in-kind. So there's some options here in terms of as you're thinking about a proposal and what those matching requirements would be. And then the scale for regional plans, we're capping it at $150,000. And then for the technical assistance, we're capping them at about $30,000. I think many of them will come in much lower than that, but there are some things that I think we can do with our planners that we have here. We have great staff at CDTC that can do more than just administer consultant contracts. So, we want to put these folks to work and be, have them be available to you folks as a resource. Moving forward, some other highlights here, public participation. For any of the projects that are not of a small scale technical nature, we are going to require a public participation process. So certainly the linkage program studies, the regional plan implementation projects that might require a consultant effort, those will be required to follow our public participation requirements. And in terms of how we would select what we're proposing, as I said, staff would do an initial screen of these based on this evaluation matrix that we've included in the solicitation material. Obviously, one of the things we'd be looking for is this is an intermunicipal or regional effort. So it benefits you if you have a partner. Doesn't exclude you, but it benefits you if you do. We're going to ask for sort of your best guess at the point of entry here, what your cost estimate might be, and we're going to work with you folks on that if you are to be considered for funding. Some of the primary criteria includes study area in an environmental justice community. Does the applicant describe how they intend to involve all affected parties in the planning process? What's the demonstrated need for the project? Does it advance one or more of our division's planning and investment principles? Are there emerging issues or opportunities that the project might be trying to tackle? There's lists here. Does it address more than one of FHWA's emerging emphasis areas in the categories of resiliency, equity, complete streets, etc.? And does the project advance or implement one of our big ticket initiatives? So does it support the regional greenway program? Does it support demand management, ride sharing systems, et cetera, et cetera? So there's lots of ways that folks can access the funds. I don't want to go through all of the specifics, but get to the key points on application requirements. We're going to be asking for a cover letter from the lead elected official or the chief executive of your agency, committing to the local match and to the project proposal. If a location map is appropriate, we're asking you to submit that. If there's letters of commitment from additional project partners, maybe there's not-for-profit groups that you're partnering with, other municipalities, whomever, we would ask that you support that. And there'll be an online application form that will prompt you in terms of filling out a basic application. It's not meant to be burdensome, probably less than 20 questions, maybe even closer to 10. If we can get it down to 10, that'd be great. That will mirror sort of those evaluation criteria so that you're able to hit those key points. And as I said, all projects will need to have a municipal sponsor. We will also be having, as part of this, a workshop to further explain some of the details. And if you're not able to attend the workshop, we will entertain a personal meeting with you to go over any ideas that you may have. So that we can get the best applications on the table that we can. We will try to do that that workshop sometime at the end of second half of October. So that is the overview of the proposal. Does anyone have any specific questions? And I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Sandy, the last sentence you said about that proposed date and time, I just didn't catch the end of that.
So the workshop, we'll schedule for the second half of October.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's a great pivot by CDTC to focus on implementing the regional plan, local projects, and sort of amplifying the priorities in the regional plan through action. So I applaud the new direction of CDTC in this regard.
Basically, doing the same thing. Kudos, particularly on the match. It was very difficult for me to obtain $15,000 to do the linkage study. You know, I had to really push for it. And if this had been in place, so I think it's going to encourage smaller municipalities. One thing specifically on the regional, you have parking management plans. Those would normally not be a regional issue. I was just wondering why that was in there.
It depends on the context, right? So there are communities in this region for which parking is a regional issue because of the nature of their commute patterns.
Oh, okay.
For other communities, it might be more of a local issue. So that's one of those, it depends on the context.
Sandy, one other question, if you don't mind. The timeline, when you first started out, it was in our notes here for the first item, the call for projects. Will there be a mailing to municipalities?
No, we will blast this out by regular mail, email, and we'll get it to our community planner forum and obviously you folks.
We appreciate it too. So DOT becomes pen pals with some municipalities when they come to us asking us to implement something they just have on their wish list. And we're trying to steer them to CTC and say, look, go apply for the leakage program. It's a great program to really suss what you want. You know, it starts with, hey, I want sidewalk and lights on my road. Sure, good for you. You know, so we've become pen pals with some folks, and this is a good segue to that. But they're small municipalities, we're trying to make them aware of this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's one of the challenges we always have is reaching the broader region. You know, the folks that sit at this table have the working knowledge of how CDTC works, but we have 77 municipalities in this region, and sometimes we don't get to see and communicate with all of them on a regular basis. So, you know, one of the things I intend to do is hopefully reach out to as many folks as I can. To kind of plug this opportunity and let them know that this is the first year we're doing this. We will probably be adjusting it in the future once we see how it plays out, but we definitely want to open the door to get your input, not only here again at the planning committee level, but in the region on our work plans. So thank you for the feedback.
So key dates recap: November 19th, applications due. This planning committee will get to review and approve this UPWP the February meeting, first Wednesday of February, I believe. 30-day public review begins, and in early March, all applicants will get notice of their status of application, and the policy board will see this March 2022 meeting. So that's a quick highlight of key milestone dates. Can we, planning committee members, get an update at our January meeting?
Yep.
Just an informational update, but we'll vote on it at the February meeting. So that's a quick PC overview. Any other questions or discussion? This is a voting item, is that right?
Yeah, it's just the timeline's a little tight.
Well, we have another timeline that will likely be adjusting, so
Yeah,
hang on to that.
it's like due November 19th.
The reason that we do have to move on this one, unlike the TIP, which we're going to get into, this one doesn't have the same level of flexibility. So in order for us to put the work plan together, we're going to need proposals by. In the future, when we do this again, I just took over in August. What many MPOs, and I should say other MPOs do it this way, but they would start much earlier. So, probably put a call for projects out even sometimes as early as August or September. So,
Yeah.
again, this is new to us and, I appreciate. the
No, I
comment.
know, the tight timeline, just hope next year give us a little bit more time to,
Understood.
particularly if you're talking regional initiatives, you've got to get a lot of parties at the table.
Absolutely, understood.
So yeah, on page 6, there's under application requirements, there are two trends that say insert registration link, insert job form link.
Yes.
Do those exist right now or?
We're building those.
Okay.
Yep. So I just didn't want to put a URL in there that wasn't accurate.
If I, question, like the difference between this direction and previous UPWPs. Previous UPWP was driven more by CDTC and staff decision-making. So
Correct.
do you imagine maybe more of a hybrid in the future, with some of this UPWP carved out for CDTC? Correct, okay.
Yeah, that's what I think we're trying to gauge. We have what we are legally bound to do, which has to be in our work plan. Then there's things that the staff deem important, or because maybe they've heard it through an advisory committee, or it's part of our new visions plan, or whatever other planning documents. And then there's also what communities need, and our regional partners need. So we want to make sure that we have a full picture of the needs, because that will inform us as we move forward in the future with building a new visions plan, whatever that looks like in a few more years. I'm hoping we'll be able to learn a lot through this process.
Was the linkage always part of this?
So the link,
Okay,
yeah, linkage was always sort of a separate solicitation, and that was the other thing we were trying to do, is sort of consolidate solicitations a little bit, because we were pumping out, oh, here's a solicitation for this program and this program, and it was to your point, Liz, we're pumping a lot of solicitations at folks at different points throughout the year. But I think if we can make this more of a matter of routine, it's not to say that we wouldn't still do that for certain subjects. But if we can consolidate things a little bit, you folks know, much like you think about the Regional Economic Development Council proposals, you always know the time of year that that's coming to prepare. You might know, oh, CDTC is going to issue this planning call in the spring, summer, whatever timeframe it ends up being on a regular basis, and then you can plan accordingly.
Yeah, thank you for not doing it at the same time as the consolidated budget.
Yeah, we would not do that to you. Yeah, we would not do that to you.
Very good. Any other discussion before we vote on the UPWP? I didn't do a motion or a second yet on this outline. So this is could be seen as a streamlining of the UPWP and maybe really underscoring the unified term of UPWP. It was always an umbrella, and now we're wrapping in this expansive three-pronged opportunity into UPWP. So that's great streamlining, great opportunity for everyone. If you all,
Steve, can I throw one question out to Sandy? Does the point, Sandy, you just talked about, does this mean that there will be the linkage that we're used to is now going to be encompassed each year as we do the UPWP, and there will not be a separate solicitation for linkage projects? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and the TAP are two separate items that they're parallel each other, they're separate and parallel?
The TAP CMAC is a NISDOT program.
No, excuse me, CDRPC TAP
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
TAP that's here.
That tab, yes, there's lots of tabs. Yes, the CDRPC, CDTC Technical Assistance Program will still have a reserve of funding in the UPWP for technical assistance requests that come up throughout the year. So that program is not going away.
Okay, thank you.
We could change the name if someone has a better name.
TAP can always go back to TEP. That would be easy.
TAP, yes, lots of acronyms.
On page 2, just another edit, the second paragraph, it says projects may be submitted for one of the 4 project categories.
Yeah, that's, thank you for catching that.
three categories.
Three categories.
Any other discussion before we vote? Input. Motion to adopt as outlined on the 7 pages in our advanced agenda, very well laid out. It's noted. Motion by Liz. Second, thank you. All right. All in favor, please say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Online. Thank you. Any abstaining or opposed? Going once, one twice, we hereby adopt our UPWP solicitation and project items. Thank you, Sandy.
Great, thanks,
Great
everyone.
initiative for expansion and streamlining. Next item up is 4C Charlie, is the Technical Assistance Program Glenville Project Proposal.
Thanks.
Sandy.
Thanks, Steve. So I'm going to show a map on screen so you can kind of get an idea of the project area we're talking about. The town of Glenville has requested technical assistance for a section of the community around Glenridge Road and Maple Avenue. They're interested in looking at bike ped access on Glenridge Road from basically Woodcrest Drive, which is sort of in this area right here, to the circle down at Maple. Hopefully connecting to what they term Cozydale Park, which I believe sits right about here. So if you're familiar with this area, there's a large hill, there's a narrow railroad bridge. So they're looking at options of perhaps, if it doesn't, if it's not really convenient or comfortable to use it, to think about a trail along Glenridge Road itself. Is there a way to perhaps weave something through the neighborhood or using some other access options? So we're going to do a sketch level planning exercise with the town, or propose to do it, to look at these options in the town of Glenville. And that is the technical assistance proposal before you.
Open for discussion at this time. Be clear, thank you for the overview, Sandy. Nice ortho image. So local kind match. The finances are on the advanced agenda item 4C. Full budget, federal 6,000.
It's so yeah, so this would primarily be a CDTC staff activity with some assistance from CDRBC as well. The local in kind match is shown here at 25% in kind for a total project commitment of about $7,700.
The recommendation in the master plan, is this the recommendation to evaluate alternatives, or would this further advance?
They
larger
are,
recommendations?
yeah, they have a recommendation in one of their, I think it is the comprehensive plan or the town central plan, I'm forgetting which one, for this trail. Part of the trail has been built up to town hall. I believe it's may not be a full trail, I think it's a sidewalk, so this would be sort of an extension of that and looking at the feasibility of it.
Any other discussion, questions? Small but important project. Ready for motion? Aye. You got motion?
I'll make a motion.
John Scow, thank you, John. Second by
Second.
Andrew Gresham, thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand, nod your
Aye.
head. Thank you. Any abstaining or opposed? 4C TAP project. Once, one twice, hearing none, hereby adopted by the planning committee. Thanks, Sandy. Thank you all. Into discussion items, 5 on our agenda. First up is 5A, the 2019 through 24 tip and step performance changes. And Sandy will guide us through this.
Yes, so I'll start off and, again, I'll pass it to Greg to jump in here. As we said at the beginning of the meeting, we do a review of the status of the existing capital projects on the transportation improvement program to see which are meeting the schedule to be constructed in the fiscal year they were assigned on the TIP. There is a line at which if construction is not authorized, we have to move the project into the next fiscal year. So we worked with NISTAT staff to reach out to all the local government sponsors to confirm the status of their projects and their schedules. And the document that I will pull up on our screen summarizes those moves. And sorry.
So, yeah, in short,
Go ahead.
this is the annual STIP performance discussion around it's amended and unamended. So amended is the year that just ended 5 days ago. Federal fiscal year that ended 5 days ago. Statewide and CDTC, everybody, we're 100% compliant with the amended STIP performance, I believe. Because every project that didn't get construction authorization, we moved to the subsequent year. This table reflects the handful of projects that didn't make it to construction last year. So that's these here.
Right. Second group.
Unamended STIP performance, is another metric they look at where Federal Highway will take a snapshot of what federal fiscal year that we're starting looks like first. And then next October 1, they're going to evaluate this year and say how many of the projects that were on there today get obligated in the same year. 75% metric for that. I don't know where we were last year yet. We haven't pulled that up yet. So we try to move. So any of these, if any project has any hint of risk of not getting delivered, we request the sponsor move it out of the year so that it move back in if they get their issues resolved. Yes, they'll move out. As a matter of caution.
The deferral summary table, this is a comprehensive list of every project that's scheduled for construction in this federal fiscal year.
These are only the ones that moved out. So these are now all year 4.
Okay,
There's a whole longer list of projects that remained in the current year.
okay.
So there's a fairly lengthy list. It's a robust year for delivery. So please, everyone that says you're delivering, please do deliver.
Yes. As we said at the beginning, this is a little bit of an administrative exercise. It's just to demonstrate that projects are moving forward. And that obviously when we hit the end of the federal fiscal year, we need to make some adjustments because things have fallen behind. And, you know, COVID definitely impacted things this year. So things were moving a little slower than normal, getting through some of the processes. Even getting supplies for construction was a challenge for many sponsors. So we know that this was a challenging year, but we do thank everybody who responded, and we heard from every sponsor. If you see any mistakes or anything that's incorrect on these tables, please let us know immediately. But again, as I said also at the beginning, these were project selection changes. They don't require your approval to make these moves. But we wanted to let you know the moves that were made so that we have full transparency. And as we build the new TIP, we need to keep these projects in mind.
And once you get to 24, projects need to move, it's, even though this plan ends, that's okay, or how does that?
You know, since we're updating, we have a 4-year STIP and a 3-year TIP update cycle. So year 4 will become year 1 of the new TIP, and everything will be reshuffled as part of that process.
Great. Discussion on that, unless you all have any other questions.
Thank you, Sandy. 5A, moving into 5B, 2019 through 24 TIP project selection changes.
Yes, so one of the things that I felt was important to do moving forward with the planning committee and the policy board, we talk a lot about this project selection process where we say to you folks, as I just said, we don't need your approval to move some things. And we often do that for very minor changes to the TIP. Sometimes it's as simple as a typo. Sometimes it's actually some dollar value. So what I wanted to do on a monthly basis and kind of make this a matter of routine is just to report back to the planning committee what those project selection moves were. This is an attempt to be just a little more forthcoming with information. We're not trying to hide anything, at all, but this is just to document for your information what these project selection moves were when we talk about them. So this table reflects everything that was moved from August 4th through September 28th. Sometimes there were a couple of cost increases in that mix. Some of it was fund source changes. There's some descriptive information on what the action was. But again, this is more just for your information, so that you have a complete picture of how all the federal funding is being utilized at CDTC.
A suggestion, can you put the responsible agency on this table? Because otherwise,
sure.
you gotta look at that to find
Yeah.
out who's who.
Who asked for it?
Yeah.
Sure.
Squeeze that in there.
Sure. And just to point out, the two cost increases were for A590, and we probably should put a little bit of a description on the project it is, and then we can look them up.
Well, on the other notes, under agency, the notes.
Yeah, but you gotta flip that. It
Yeah.
has to be on the same table. So you just look at that table and know
Right
what
there.
it is.
On
Project.
Other notes.
Looking at this one.
Oh, not that one, yeah, I was looking at that.
And
Yeah, that's the
sorry.
new.
58 is the Schenectady PSAP project. I just knows off the top of my head.
Good.
Thank you.
Schenectady added 544,000 to their own funds, correct?
I think that's on right here.
Thank you.
It's noted as local increase, 544,000. That's good. Thank you for that information. Good update. Any other questions on 5B?
Yeah, I have a question if you don't mind. Again, my apologies. I can't hear the discussion around the table hardly, but just a quick question on this. This table, does this represent that project selection process that if something's not big enough to require an amendment, this is just something that I call Glenn with, or I'll talk with DOT, and this is the sort of mechanism used? Is that what this reflects?
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
150,000 or less, that's a phone call and it's done. But that's.
Okay.
Put the report out, the minor changes, yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Any other questions? Moving forward.
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Very good. All right, next item up is 5C Charlie is 2022 through 27. It's in our agenda. I don't have a page on it. Thanks for reading.
This is presented at meetings, so there's a number of things that we just wanted to verbally update you folks on because the TIP is a moving target. The first thing we wanted to talk about was how we're going to handle the post-TIP project. So as you may recall, in the current TIP, we have a column called PostTip. It's post 24, and those projects are there largely for information only. They don't have any funding status, although there's funding assigned to the projects. When you look at the listings, they're not within the true TIP at this point. So typically what we do this time of year is when we're doing the update, we ask the sponsors to confirm the schedule, cost, and scope of those projects. My goal is there are a number of these that have been sitting in the post column, or one of which I heard was, Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong, 29 years. And I think it's time that if there isn't a real commitment to the project and it's not able to compete well in our process to actually make it onto the TIP, we need to decide what to really do with it. Because parking them in the post-tip, I think the spirit of it always was, well, we'll have this reserve of projects in the event that there's some resource that becomes available mid-cycle. That hasn't happened. It rarely happens. And when it does happen, we usually issue a solicitation for new projects anyway. So the purpose of that post-tip column might not have the purpose that it could have going forward. And we'll talk more about that. We're not looking to make any decisions on it today. The main thing is we wanted to inform the sponsors who do have projects parked in the post-tip column that you will be getting an email from us with a request to reapply for those projects, to update cost, scope and schedule. Though we do not hear from you, they will be removed from the post column and they will not be part of the next TIP. So is there any question or comment about that?
Yeah, you don't have an expiration date, like if you haven't acted on it in 5 years, it goes off the table, you gotta come back.
We never had it in the past. This is something, new director, I'm interested in ensuring that the projects that are on our TIP are real and have the commitment behind them and are actually being moved forward, so.
Call it the spirit of Frank Bonifay here. Old projects, they're stale, they're stagnant. There really needs to be a cutoff date. I mean, even the cost estimates and the scope will have changed if it's not acted upon within a date certain. So if we're kicking the can down the road, set a 3-year window, something that denotes not significant change, something that might be able to be amended to reflect currency. But some of these old ones, they're just not viable anymore.
I agree with that fully. If a project hasn't started, once a project starts, we know there could be issues with railroad right away that could bog a project down for years. But we're made aware of that by the sponsor, CDTC and DOT. So, I think this group's always been flexible with those type of projects. But if a project hasn't started, the scope, the cost, the price tag is just, it's not going to accurately reflect. So.
I agree with that.
Well-
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Some of that discussion at the last round of our tip update, where there are some projects that are in this column and noted, mainly because they seem to be valid projects that just couldn't make the cut against others at the last time. And they were sort of held out there as reminders as we go through the next process. They're not 20-year-old projects. They were in the last solicitation. It just didn't make it. And I think that was something that there's one part of the conversation, and then I had it around the table, was have something there to keep something before people so that as they come into the next solicitation, they see what projects may have been strongly considered, particularly by the sponsor, and just for some reason didn't make the grade, or they were competing against really strong projects. So if you're looking to say get rid of that whole category, I'm looking for something to take its place because of the fact that we have a transitional committee here that's may not be here for the next solicitation. And there may be something that just for whatever reason just couldn't cut the mustard.
Perhaps, Mike, on that sponsor submission, they could denote that it is being submitted again, and that it was previously considered but not adopted. And that might give more credibility to the consideration the next go round. But to carry it just on paper for reference, I don't think that serves a purpose.
Yeah.
Other than administrative, keep pushing it on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, anything that's in the post column in order to be brought into the new tip is going to have to recompete with the current mix of projects.
Right.
I think all of the post column was more to keep, whatever that project was on the radar screen, that this did compete well in the past. Now we need to go back to that sponsor and say, are you still committed to it? Things have changed because sometimes sponsors pursue those projects in other ways. So we need to confirm projects are real moving forward, but then they also still need to compete with the new.
Right, I'd agree fully with that. That it wasn't my point to disagree with that at all. Just sort of giving a background for those who may not have been part of the discussion before.
We also have a part of the TIP document that has it's Appendix E, which is a list of project candidates, which has all of the candidates that didn't make it onto the TIP in the previous update. So that might be the substitute that you're looking for, Mike.
Okay, and I've seen that before, Glenn. Thanks for pointing that out.
It's disorienting to hear myself speaking like with a 2-second delay from the sound coming from the conference room. Sorry.
Shut the door.
I'd like to share as chair, remember our history, and there are some major projects in the post column. And personally, the Exit 3 Airport Access Connector, other projects, Bachelorville Bridge, other major projects of regional significance we could cite. We can recall that history in this post column. So some may be very important projects, but we know that it's good to keep our eye on that wall as we move forward and just maintain consistency in our planning policy over decades, and that not everything can be accomplished in 4-year or 5-year window. Worthy projects are accomplished in the long-range planning paradigm of decades, and Exit 3, I think, took 40 years. So your project with 28 years is still in a slow ripening process. Think of it as a ripeness test, and major projects will require major funding commitments from federal, state, and local partners to accomplish worthy projects. So just keep that in mind. Don't think we're going to wipe the slate clean for all those projects.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Shouldn't there be like a list of that type of project, the long range
Yeah, I mean,
projects?
those are exceptions. I mean,
No, not necessarily. Long-range planning needs to be acknowledged and planned for as we move forward.
Well, one looming
Beyond 5
example
years.
that I think we could talk about is the Route 378 Bridge project, because we're embarking as a region on this major planning study for the likely replacement of the bridge. That is going to be far beyond the regional, meaning CDTC resources to fund through our typical TIP project. But to your point, Steve, similar to an Exit 3, we'd have to still show some priority for it somewhere. Maybe the post column is one way to do that. Maybe there's a way to do that in text, but the funding ultimately would likely come from either the statewide pool of resources or a federal grant program.
Builder, infra, whatever they name it
Right.
next. But the post column does inform the statewide funding for the major investments. So it's not a bad thing, but maybe some maintenance of it, a refresh, like if it's 29 years old, you gotta go to the sponsor and say, please update this project scope and cost, or give it up. It's,
well, oftentimes it's like anything else. Once you have it established somewhere, you don't want to let go of it. Just because something was done at one point, the energy was expended and somebody considered it, so keep it on there. But the viability of these things, I mean, they're just not there. They've aged, they've stagnated out.
Yeah, I think the mailing coming out from Sandy or whomever later, just saying, okay, guys, we note this is hanging out there. Do you have any interest, or are you going to resubmit? You don't get a response, knock it out.
I was just curious how many projects we're talking about that are on there. Is it like,
And it's probably less than 20, the exact number
Okay.
I'm not certain of, but
okay,
it's a
I agree
small
with that. I
number.
think just checking in and refreshing it would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, it should be like a regular process, annual, to go back to them and say, hey, your project's still, here. We haven't seen anything. You know,
It's an important tip to have.
With requirements to maintain it,
yeah.
not just acknowledging, yeah, it's still good.
It's still good, yeah.
Yeah.
Understood.
it's $3 million 29 years ago. Yeah. That's,
No, thank you for the input on that. We'll take your suggestions and develop material to send out to the sponsors to kind of at least reconfirm what's on there today. And then we'll see what information we get back as we fold it into the update of the TIP.
You mentioned 378 Bridge. Are there other major cost impacts, which I'll formally call the gorilla in the room?
There's a lot. It's, we, staff, we never know where they're gonna come from. Greg's department probably has a number of big ticket, we'll call them, projects.
Big ticket.
But I know municipalities have them as well, so.
Here, it's good to be fully cognizant, and to my view, long-range planning is as important as the near-term 4 years.
Right.
As we guide to move forward, as the tip evolves, decade to decade.
Great.
Any other comments before we move forward?
A couple more things on the tip status. Not only will be working with all of the local sponsors at DOT to start confirming cost and scope of all of the existing TIP projects. That allows us to build a budget for the existing resources that are already committed to in anticipation of seeing what the allocation is for our TIP, hopefully to be released in a timely manner. Speaking of that, the main thing that I wanted to point out today was with respect to the schedule. I'll let Greg introduce the challenges that we're experiencing with NISTAT. Don't shoot the messenger.
DOT, at program update times, timeline usually is DOT gets some instructions and an indication of the planning targets much earlier than now. And we develop an internal program that meets various needs, asset management, long-range planning, all those things. And then after we do our internal exercise, we give instructions out to the MPOs. And then we can bring our projects forward with that. We have not gotten our allocate planning target drafts or instructions yet. And but we are moving ahead with an internal program. But until we have the instructions, we can't divulge what our thoughts for a program are. So we can't submit projects to this table until they're telling us, they're saying December, we're hoping it's truly December. Maybe as late as very early January for our schedule to bring projects forward. We spoke, we're trying to come up with an efficient way for us to give it to CDTC so that the scoring can happen quickly. But our schedule is sort of gonna possibly cause changes to the tip schedule as it's been advertised thus far.
So I just shared my screen with some information for the committee. The basic steps are outlined in the first column. The original scheduled dates are in the second column. The first line represents in yellow the TIP project proposal deadline. So our original schedule proposed all sponsors to submit proposals by the November 5th. As you just heard Greg say, the department's not going to be able to meet that deadline at all. And in fairness to all of the other sponsors, we can kick it out. In scenario A, we would kick it out to December 3rd. How that impacts things moving forward is that it squeezes the review time our staff has. The original schedule would have given us 5 weeks to review, then it goes down to 4. But we can largely maintain the rest of the schedule with our traditional meeting dates for a planning committee and policy board and public review. If it gets kicked to January, January 7th, I just picked that date as an example. Staff would only get about 3 weeks to evaluate everything. We would have to move, the original January planning committee meeting, we wouldn't be able to talk about new projects at all. So we would be asking a lot of this body by probably having upwards of at least 2, if not 3 planning committee meetings in the month of February. And probably would need to shift the policy board meeting out to mid-month in March, just to squeeze everything in and still honor our public involvement requirements for 60 days. It's going to be a challenge, but I just wanted to share with you folks the impact and see, if you had any thoughts because the schedule is subject to change, even if we were to take an action today, that's why this is not on the agenda as an action, it might not matter, frankly. But I wanted to gauge your opinion on at least picking out this local deadline to maybe December 3rd. Because I don't think, and forgive me wrong to Craig, it would be surprising if you guys would get to go ahead even that early.
It sounds surprising that we would. We're trying to figure out if we can perhaps submit our projects for scoring, but not release them to the public committee until we're authorized, but at least it would help the scoring effort to not wait, go. Because we submit a lot of projects. I mean, everyone here submits 2, 3, maybe 4. We submit dozens. Heavy workload if we submit them the latest. We're trying to. So
Is
pre-score.
that viable for you to do, to submit for review to CDTC prior to the approval from
We're
feds?
figuring that out of trying to get it pre-scored and then say, okay, we can publicly display these now. Like, we're trying to figure that scenario out.
Because that, I mean, that scenario definitely affects my consideration of what's viable up there. Because you're the load. And if they're telling you that you might not get approval till, and when they say December, I'm assuming December 31st.
Yeah, that, I mean,
So
I was told
that kicks in scenario B, but if you can get a pre-review done, that crunch time of 3 weeks to evaluate projects gets alleviated. So scenario B could actually exist, but without that crunch on the review, and that makes it more viable. And I'd rather see that to allow all the other sponsors to be given the same amount of prep time, to have equity across the board, but not to put undue pressures on the review process. So if, I mean, I'd say that's the driver. If that can occur, if that pre-review process for DOT projects can occur, then push it out.
So for a municipality to submit, what's deadline would be January?
So depending on, how things play out, I think my comfort level from a staff perspective is we could kick it out a month and publicly say, December 3rd is an extension, and then see how it plays out with the department. I think that's the closest we're gonna get to equity between the state and the local, only because, I think if and again, Craig's being as transparent as he can be. If we can get the program proposals from the department, even the second week officially, but yet have the evaluation material we need. As you folks know, a lot of their projects are more, preservation oriented, right? And then for our evaluation, what sometimes we might need is little information. If you're doing a Northway project and you're repaving, I just might need to see what road, the from and to, and what your treatment is. And if you caught, and then we can add in the cost, but like, it's not as complex as trying to do a complete street in a municipality is my point. So there's
Got
some
two-
things.
Two types of projects
Right.
to evaluate.
Right, but we wanted to just be transparent with everyone, and I think that extending the deadline for the locals by a month is probably fair.
I feel bad for CDTC staff more than anybody, to be honest.
Well, and the unfortunate timing issue here, aside from staff resources, which we'll get into, is it's just always happening right in the heart of the holiday season.
Yeah.
And, it's challenging to get things done. We get it done, and we only do this every 3 years, but it's a lot of work on our part to get things done. So
Is there a possibility that the state won't have its appropriation by December 31st or the information? Because would we be in a potential set aside situation for a pot towards DOT?
Well, the programming, I mean, project programming isn't gonna happen till mid-February. Planning committee, review evaluations and begin programming possibly mid-January. I have some confidence, I wish I had all confidence, I have some confidence I'll have planning targets and programs by the first week of January. But we don't need the final numbers until really February. Because that's when we're gonna program to a target, right? So the solicitation can go on, but then the final numbers, we don't really need to crunch day.
You only have so much money, you go down the projects
Go
that
down
have been
projects that are-
evaluated and say, okay, we stop here.
And all indications are the program will be at least flat and maybe good news. All indications are it's not going down, it's going flat or better. That's as far as I can say about that direction. Because I have official numbers. You know, I'm hoping, so say scenario B is sort of the timeline. I think even under scenario B, I could get my projects in to CDTC for scoring long before January 7th. So the dozens of projects are not in the 3-week load. It will only be municipal projects, which may help.
That would help.
We get ours in a couple, we get ours in mid-December. You know, and then our evaluations are sort of on ahead.
So, but how long can we wait for DOT to get that information?
So, we obviously have a November planning committee meeting. You know, I don't want to wait to extend the deadline because obviously the deadline is November 5th, which is right around our next planning committee meeting. I'm happy to entertain the idea of kicking it out at least to December 3rd. When we meet at the beginning of November, maybe Greg has more information at that time. I don't want to continue to extend the deadline. I know that's confusing to the locals. So, you folks have complete discretion over this. It certainly helps our staff to get it in earlier, just so that we, one of the things that we get uncomfortable about is when we rush through the evaluations and then share things with you folks and you say, well, this doesn't make any sense, right? And we want to make sure we do our due diligence on the evaluation piece. So 3 weeks is tight. We're going to be short some staff for a while. Reasons that we'll talk about, but I'm okay with the December 3rd. I think for locals would be at this point the one I would be as director of the staff most comfortable with.
Are you saying defer November 3rd planning committee to December 1st Wednesday or 7th?
No, just the deadline for the solicitation. The meeting schedule would remain the same.
So we'd still have a December 1st meeting, but the deadline would be December 3rd. Is that okay?
December 2nd, Thursday the 2nd.
Yep. And the planning committee meets in November.
Well, you said, no, Thursday the 2nd is,
Policy.
Policy
Planning in
board.
December.
No planning in December on the current schedule,
Correct.
but because we have additional meetings required for the tip
Yeah.
update, this
Right.
committee today should set our policy for our preferences with what information we have. It's either 3 meetings, original, or scenario A, slightly adjusted, or 4 meetings with the scenario B that you see on your screen. So this would be an action item if you want to adopt this, or
You
just take a sense of
absolutely
motion.
can make this an action item, if you so choose to do that. As I said, I didn't put it on for action because this is all subject to change. It could change the minute we leave this room. So we just wanted to make this clear.
so the policy committee meeting then, I noticed on the original schedule, that's a Sunday for policy committee.
Thursday, the 2nd of December is firm.
That's a planning committee.
Policy.
That's
Policy
policy.
board,
Okay.
3 p.m. Thursday, the 2nd. That's pretty set.
That's that.
That's very set.
Yep.
And then we
I'm
meet
sorry,
not
that
in
date is
December.
wrong.
We
Our-
just
our-
tell us when we have to be here.
Our schedule right now is open for discussion, and our prerogative and preferences should be acknowledged, given the information that things are running late.
Right, so the November 3rd would be the next planning committee meeting. December 2nd, I apologize for the typo, I will change it right now, is the next policy board meeting.
Right.
Or
So
no,
they will meet without anything to do with our solicitation then.
the meetings that are impacted by the solicitation are all the ones highlighted in the sort of pink color here.
Okay,
Our original schedule, January 5th, would be the first meeting in the month of January, with an additional meeting on the 19th, and the third meeting at our regularly scheduled time, the first Wednesday of February, February 2nd. So the original schedule would honor our existing planning committee schedule. In scenario A, we would kick out the first January planning committee meeting a week and maintain the other two meetings. And in the third scenario, because we couldn't address anything at all, we would still kick out the January planning committee meeting by a week and add planning committee meetings in the second part of January and one in March. That would be our worst case scenario.
if you go to the scenario A with the dates of the 12th and the 19th, does that give you time as staff to turn around a vast amount of paperwork to us and be reviewed by you?
We will have to do it.
The other thing, I know we did this with the last tip, with the first couple meetings, when this committee looked at the sheets and where the pots of money were gonna be allocated, we didn't accomplish what we thought we would do on a specific date. So when I entered these dates, I actually reserved every Wednesday as tentative. And I would potentially, just advise people, we may be in that situation too,
Right.
that schedule just reserve that extra week in between too, as a tentative date, that if we don't accomplish what we need to, we may have to come back in a special meeting.
And virtual meetings to make that friction
Yeah.
a little bit less.
Right, if as long as we can participate virtually, then it's less onerous.
So under the current circumstances, I would put forth the need to adopt scenario A. Not that I'm confident it will occur, but because it's a good target for all involved parties. By that time, we should hopefully know a little bit more about DOT's issues, and we can move on from there. But right now, I don't find the original schedule as viable, so we shouldn't adhere to it. And you need a motion for scenario A. I'm putting it
One
forth.
more discussion. Scenario B is probably more likely or probable from information we're given at the state. So let's kick it around just a little more. Do we need a November 3rd meeting? What's on our agenda next month?
The only reason we would need a November meeting is if there's any action items. At this point, we don't have an answer to that question.
I think I may have some tip updates. I know DOT may have at least one tip update. Look at the second one.
Okay, we'll keep November 3rd. We have seen bi-weekly meetings. John's point is good. It's good to have contingency plans. It could go to weekly, but were we at weekly? Maybe once we went to weekly. Once we went to weekly and it was a lot of grumbling.
I can tell you the system
I
schedule
think
we
they let us
had.
know. So,
They serve donuts or better refreshments.
The worst case we've ever. had
I'll
was
second
the
Andrew's motion.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, moving forward. Is that the preference of the committee? Everybody should be comfortable. Is everyone
So
comfortable?
no planning committee meetings in December.
There are no
No.
planning committee.
Okay,
meetings
because
in the
I'm
month of
just looking at my
December.
Nothing in
calendar.
December, but January, February is gonna be some heavy lifting either way we go.
I think if it's, I agree with the December 3rd date, but if we think it's realistic that it's, we're not gonna have it by then, like changing the date is not ideal either. So I don't know, I think the December 3rd is like, yeah, it makes sense, but if we really think that it's not gonna be possible for them, I don't see a point in shifting the deadline.
So I hate to be the cold water of DOT.
Can everyone hear Greg?
Yeah,
Use
sorry.
your loud voice, Greg.
So I have little assurance I could meet in December 3rd. I do feel like somewhere between December 3rd, around December 3rd, I could get my applications in from DOT, but they can't be, I'm not sure when I'd be allowed to publish them to the committee. So I'm not sure at the planning committee meeting, and you know what I mean?
Right.
So even though CDTC would review them, it wouldn't come to
We
the,
couldn't publish the list for all.
so it makes no difference then to have it done early until we can actually review them.
Right. So my point is,
Okay.
we can get our dozens of projects in between December 3rd and January 7th. Hopefully very close to December 3rd. But what that does is we're probably half or better of the valuation rate.
You're at least a third of it, yeah.
Okay. So it's,
But I think it's as equitable as possible to keep the locals to the December 3rd deadline, because you're in a special situation here that, you know, you just can't push everybody else back even further.
Well,
I agree, and I
yes,
thought, I mean, that also is about, we could do what we can do here to give staff enough time, and then once DOT comes in, you know, we deal with that, but it seems like we can make progress if we hit the December 3rd date and still do the due diligence. I mean, the DOT deadline is still, we're talking separate. It is kind of a separate part of the process, right? Like, we still can do what we can do, but we can't complete all of that. Or move, I guess, to the next phase until we get Greg, you're still here.
So pure
It's gonna
numbers
put
of
them,
this
evaluate them,
project.
put them on hold until you get the final.
well, let me throw this out to folks that have a tip update. Where are you in the process right now? Would scenario A December 3rd, substantially change the way you're going about your submission?
I'm still sticking to my November. 5th
Exactly,
timeline
and that's
that
what I
I've already
see. I don't
established.
I don't see this being much other than an accommodation to the needs of DOT. So that might have to be the driver in order, you know, for the review. I mean, we have to review these projects in totality. So that when DOT knows that they're going to be able to make these things public, that's going to be our date. Whether it's a submission date that's earlier, I mean,
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
yeah.
Well, I mean, to have another month is good for applicants.
But is it? I
Is
mean,
it?
we've been working
I
on,
think it is,
the-
given the other deadline of November 19th for the linkage and all of that. I think it's helpful.
Yeah, I think it is, if we've got another submission to make.
I'll take the extra time.
Yeah, yeah,
Shouldn't
I
say
mean,
that.
municipalities haven't been in this process before, have a lot of work, and then if there's another grant program. And then, you know, another month is nice to have.
so going back to then scenario A, but I still feel there needs to be a contingency for DOT. I mean, it can't exist.
Which is
With
scenario
that-
B. B is your
Well,
contingency.
Well, no,
If
Greg
we
is
go
saying
to-
that they still might not meet those dates. He's
Right.
looking at scenario B. Or did I say scenario B? I meant scenario A.
Yeah, I think the compromise might be, we extend the local solicitation deadline to December 3rd. We say to DOT, when you guys can get the go-ahead for us to release the information publicly, we can get it in our hands to start the evaluation, that's great. When we can release it publicly to the committee, we can do that. We don't have any meetings scheduled in the month of December. We'll be missing, with the December 3rd deadline, we'll be missing the policy board meeting anyway, so they wouldn't be seeing any preliminary lists. So the first opportunity for you folks to see it would be whatever that January planning date would be.
I think that works.
And even if we don't have their projects, we could still review what was submitted for
Right.
the local
Right.
projects.
And while we compete against DOT, there's certain interstate projects and stuff that pure numbers,
Yeah.
we just don't compete with.
No,
Yeah,
Because the
yeah.
numbers are what they are with
No,
projects. so.
Okay.
they're auto stamps.
Yes.
No
So-
pun
I
intended.
didn't know.
Just take a minute to get Sandy's clarification on.
Carrie is diligently taking many meeting notes.
Thank you, Carrie.
I think what we're hearing is scenario A, we'll go with bumping out the,
Scenario A with an acknowledgement that DOT is a special circumstance that will be acted upon accordingly pursuant to federal actions.
Yeah, there's that too.
there's that too.
Yeah, that's going real well.
So the motion is modified. Was it moved by Andrew Kreshik, second by Michael? Is that correct?
Yes, that's it.
On board, Michael, thank you. It modifies our planning committee schedule as noted in scenario A from the first Wednesday to the second Wednesday of January. That is to the 12th, with the other dates noted, January 19th and February 2nd. We're gonna have to be flexible. John Scavo's point was very good that at least keep some contingencies on your schedule for Wednesdays in this period of January, February to accommodate tip adoption by the planning committee, please. We're ready to vote on this action item, new action item. Everyone comfortable? Any more discussion? Who's good vetting? Michael's good. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any abstaining or opposed? Thank you very much. Good input.
Sandy, can we get an update of this emailed to us so we can send it out to others?
Yeah, we'll do a big push and we'll update the schedule online. So thank you. And, you know, it's not ideal for any of us. And none of us are super excited about this, but, you know, we'll try to be as accommodating as we can be and still meet our underlying goals. So thank you.
And with that positivity, you're going into staffing now, right?
Well, set aside, right?
We got to tackle one more tip item, which is regional set asides. I know, and you thought this meeting would be short today.
Yeah.
No, Steve, there was a reason why I didn't put a presentation on it.
Okay.
So, you know, we wanted to introduce this topic today. We are not, again, this is not an action item. We wanted to just introduce it so we can get thinking about how we want to handle the regional set asides as we build the new TIP. The document in your handout, share on screen, contains a summary of the types of set-asides we have currently, which generally fall into two categories. They are often what we call block funds, in which a topic area, and I'll pick the durable pavement marking set-aside for DOT as an example, where there's an amount of money set aside for that treatment, and the department can draw down upon that at any time without reporting back, because these are small amounts of money, without reporting back to this body. So CDTC they don't come to us to report back on how each project that's being spent in the block funds.
Well,
Coolest way to say it.
I do need slightly, some of the, I need to correct a little bit of that. My apologies.
That's okay.
Several of these, like durable actually, they cover the 8 counties, so regional 8 counties. CDTC covers 3.9 counties, and then AGFTC covers 2.1 counties.
Just to confuse you all.
Yeah, and then there's 2 other rural counties, and a lot of these set-asides were set up because DOT spends the money across all 8 counties at once, every year. And but we have to reflect all money in every county on the respective tip. So show a balance here, a balance in AGFTC, and then the remaining balance is Green and Essex counties. So that's the backstory of where these came from. But that does not mean we're still not open to modifications as we're starting to discuss. That's for a lot of these set-asides, DOT program.
The other type of set-aside we have is what we're calling a placeholder for specific projects. And this would be the type of set-aside where a sponsor or an entity would draw down upon and create a new TIP project. So the CDTA's bus rapid transit set-aside is an example of a placeholder set-aside. So we have these two types of set asides, and we wanted to just kind of throw some questions at you as food for thought. We can discuss them a little bit today, and we'll come back to this at a future meeting as things evolve. But in terms of how we want to handle set asides moving forward, one of the things we will analyze is their use, right? I don't think anybody can argue in this room, correct me if I'm wrong, that the CDTA example of a set aside is an extremely successful set aside, because having that placeholder, being able to generate BRT projects has leveraged $120 million in federal grant funding. I don't think there is any more efficient investment that a set aside has created in terms of leveraging funds. So we know there are great uses of these. We know, as Greg alluded to, there's some functional challenges that the department has to grapple with an 8-county region versus a 4-county region. So we need to just see which of all of these set asides are being used, and should tracking be established for some of these block funds if possible. Coming back to the transparency, when I summarize, and I'll show you folks the dollar value of the set asides by the category, block versus placeholder. Sharing the screen now. So all of these set asides that are listed as block amount to $157 million of our program. So when you think about how much is reserved for these set asides, that's a lot. And a lot of it, of the block funds, is kind of exclusively NISDOT use today. Local government benefits, but they don't have direct access to these funds. So we're taking a big chunk of our TIP and right off the top, putting it into the set asides. That may be a good thing, that may not be what's desired in the future, but this is the kind of thing that we wanted to talk about. So in addition to thinking about the use of block fund and whether we should establish tracking, should we be rebalancing the set asides so that locals do have access? And there's some ways that we could do that. One way would be, instead of making it a state-only set aside, what if it was based on functional classification? So principal arterial, no matter where it is, as an example, might be eligible for a pavement marking set aside. That could be something that's considered. ADA, Greg, you wanted to specifically talk about an idea for the ADA compliance set aside.
Yes, so the department, ADA transition plan, implementation is a challenge for all of us. DOT has used an ADA set aside for years to get after upgrading sidewalks and ramps in corridors, in high priority corridors. And we've, through the completion of our most recent project, which is nearly done, if not done, it's 9 and 20 East Greenbush. It kind of represents the last high volume corridor with known pedestrian demand, known transit stops, and a long stretch of known deficiencies. And we got after Western Ave first, we got after Central Avenue, we got after, now we got after 920, and there's others we've gotten after. Our big nuggets, big areas are kind of, and now we're down to a lot of smaller things on state routes where sidewalks are missing or not compliant. What we're offering is the ADA set aside to transition to a local priority. And because when we come to town with our priorities, it doesn't always jive with the local priorities.
Mhm.
So what we'd like to offer is, in this tip update, if locals have some of their ADA network on the state system that they would like upgraded, they can bring a tip project forward towards a set aside such as this, and we can figure out the funding level as a group. But the catch is if for a federal aid project in the state system, locals do not get Marchicelli funds by statute. So that traditionally, a local would then be on for 20% of the project, instead of 5% of the project on a state highway. We're given the latitude, this update, to offer 15% of state funds as the match towards a locally administered ADA improvement project. So any local brings forward, and this way, locals can get after their PED network on the state system for their priorities. And we view it as a win-win. We'll be curious to see how this is subscribed to, if there's interest in this notion, this tip update. But the state will bring forward 15% of the 20% match for ADA projects on state highways. So if for any feedback, this is a terrible idea. This is
Wonderful.
okay.
We've got something we can talk to you about.
And that,
Yeah.
And it's for sidewalks on the state system. If you do, obviously you do ADA jobs off the state system, you still get your Marchicelli. So
Yeah.
That's the, so basically make both programs walk the same way for this category.
so what has to be done to establish that as rule?
This is basically a DOT offer for the program update. So as we establish the ADA set aside, we would explain to everybody that the set aside on the state system would come with this offer.
Greg, how would you handle state roads that are locally maintained, like Route 50 or Route 9 going through a village or something?
If it's locally maintained, they still get Marchicelli. So, yeah.
All
right. Qualify. They still get the Marchicelli funds. It's when it's the DOT's responsibility that you don't get Marchicelli. So we could bring.
Okay.
It would feel to the sponsor the same as Marchicelli, but.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Monticelli, it's first time I've heard that.
So Mark, for those that, good question, Marchicelli funding is local, it's a pot of money, of state funds for only local programs, which provides a sponsor. So sponsors on the hook for 20% of a project, 80-20 match. Marchicelli provides 75 match to the sponsor, which is 15%. So the sponsor $5 federal aid project.
If available.
If available. Yes, thank you. There's always a caveat. It's by the budget every year.
Okay. All right.
Subject to annual review.
It could be less than 15%. I think one time it was a little bit more even.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's.
This one time was 20%.
Would it be handled in the same way that Marchicelli is, or would it be a component of reimbursement?
That's actually simpler because we just put it on the initial state local agreement. To be part of
Oh, great. Fantastic.
No, yeah.
So I just got two scenarios I want to run by it. If I have a local sponsored project on a state highway and it's a road reconstruction, it's the ADA element as one of the line items that's eligible, 15%, not the entire project.
Yeah, that's the intent.
Okay. I want to make sure I was clear on that.
Just put it in anyway, Just see it sticks.
See what sticks. The other item is, if it's a set aside, I'm just looking when we do federal aid administered projects, although there's no minimum amount you can apply for.
There's an efficiency.
Yeah, if it's less than $500,000, it may not even be worth going through a federal aid process. So is there, I guess it may be a regional approach. Is there a way to do like spot ADA improvements where applicants can come together and potentially package a deal? Because that's where the set aside DOT has always benefited us. Is I'll give you an example, 146, when we did a pavement preservation, we got pet signals put in. And it was through the set aside. So we benefited from that, but I don't know a project on its own, but DOT's bidding them all out
multi-site.
Yeah, so
Efficiency.
I guess that's just more of an operational consideration. I like to set aside as just for a local sponsor, how best to access the funds if it's not part of a larger project.
Good point, and that, so it does, yeah, there is a minimum project value that makes federally worth it because of the administrative. Pooling projects from a local side is tricky because you need one sponsor has to sort of take the brunt of it, and then one sponsor has to front everything, and then the other sponsors have to have their back, their other. It is tricky, but doable. And if this doesn't get subscribed to, we wanted to float it. We want to see if this doesn't work, if it's not popular.
Anything that will risk the match helps, definitely does.
What about, because one of the benefits of DOT is you guys are looking system-wide, right? And so there is that next level of analysis, I guess, right? What about if, as you're programming the set aside, it's less formal than we as locals submit, but we would submit to you guys and you guys would rank all the priorities. It would still be a DOT managed project under the set aside, but with local input, because one of the benefits of you guys doing it is
Yeah,
we don't
to write
have
the
to.
check.
You don't have anything in it, yeah. And I appreciate that, and that may, that's interesting too. The trouble, it's interesting to see how design goes. When DOT designs a project versus a local designs a project.
Yeah.
The locals are much more nimble and efficient at it. Somehow, if DOT designs the same project that a local designs, I guarantee you our project costs more and has more right-of-way impacts. Then locals have an ability to be more flexible to navigate this stuff. We draw a line and we're taking all that splitters right away for 150 parcels.
We say, call the residency.
Yeah, so,
Wondering if the happy medium is like the county do it.
Yeah.
well, there is a, right. If counties will pool them, that would be great too. But there's definitely a nimbleness to local implementation that gets the same thing done. Frankly, sometimes more.
It's just that threshold. I see that as an impediment.
Oh, yeah, if it's $100,000 job, it's a $50,000 administrator. It's not efficient.
But in addition to that concept, which we'll flesh out in a future time, the remaining questions for you to ponder. Like I said, in the interest of time, we won't get into all of the details today, but are there other topic areas for which a set aside might be useful? We'll think about that. And also, could they, again, be open to multiple sponsors and be reserved for future project solicitations or use on a first come, first served basis? So how would we implement this, right? So would we do it, whoever gets to that well first, or would it be through a solicitation process? So these are all things that we'll come back and talk about at future meetings, but we wanted to broach it today so to get you folks thinking about it, particularly this proposal from NISTAF.
One quick, this previously adopted a 10 million set aside for underrepresented asset class being the rural roads that didn't meet the functional class criteria. 10 million set aside, very useful tool in our planner's toolbox to address equity issues where a significant percentage of our roads were rural, not receiving the designation for funding, right? Sam?
Right, we'll talk about at a future meeting how that actually went.
Yeah.
The projects didn't come to fruition, so we will reevaluate that at a future meeting.
It was a policy set forward to try and sweeten the pot for some of those rural projects.
Right.
Represented asset.
To that same point, Steve, could I address, on that one with the low volume roads, bridges and culverts, there's also been a solicitation for Bridge New York, and we don't know the results of that yet. And that may impact some people's submission of any projects that may, even with the state or anybody coming through, under set-asides. So that's just another thing outstanding there yet that may impact that.
Good, it's noted, so it's a heads up for future consideration. We're ready to move forward.
We are,
And all, 5D Echo is CDTC project delivery update by Jacob Beanie.
Thanks, Steve. So I don't have any project updates for you today. We're gonna take this chance to just kind of go over the process that we've been doing for the past year or 2 years or so. Figured it'd be a good time at kind of the new tip solicitation and just get your input on if there's anything that we could change or anything that we're missing. So right now, as many of you know, CDTC collects local tip project data on a monthly basis. We get updates from local consultants that are bringing that information to DOT. And we also reach out individually to 3 to 4 project sponsors each month. We send a questionnaire that's really asking for any major project scope changes, cost changes, and really any anticipated amendments in the near future. We take all that data, wrap it up into our project delivery spreadsheet that we present each planning committee meeting for you all to review. And then in addition to that, we typically ask one of those sponsors that we reach out to each month to provide a verbal presentation on one of their projects. And really that's meant to just try to stir up some discussion, bring out any potential issues and cost overruns and things like that, maybe to bring it to attention of other sponsors if there's any material shortages or anything maybe to do right away that they should keep an eye on that could impact their local projects. So, that's kind of the process that we've been doing so far, and really just wanted to ask, do you all find this useful? Are there other things that we could add into that that could make it more useful? Do you think that that questionnaire that we're sending out is too burdensome, not burdensome enough? Which I doubt that. So really just, again, wanted to ask, if anybody had any thoughts on the process, we can discuss now, kind of throwing it in on you right now. So feel free to send me emails or give me a call. I know I've talked about this with some of the sponsors in the past. So any thoughts on that today?
is it useful? I guess, one of, with all the changes here at CDTC, we're really going to be evaluating a lot of our longstanding practices. So we want to make sure that the material we're giving you folks is of use. And if you think that it's of value to catalog the projects the way Jacob's been doing it over the years, we're happy to continue to do that. But if you think that there's more important information that should be highlighted, or, it's at the committee's design.
Jacob, I think it's important in the sense that in the past, we really didn't have that oversight for pokey projects or delayed projects. So, just taking a general sample of reporting, that probably serves the purpose to keep things in order and on time, just as a potential of getting all to the table. Or, it could be looked at, if you notice delay, then that's identified as a project that has to come to be discussed as far as why is it being delayed, what are the circumstances, so it's cleared and vetted so that the delay does not continue.
Yeah, definitely, and we do use that internally kind of for those purposes. The tip performance stuff, it's something that we can always go back and check on and say, hey, what was the last update that we got on specific projects? So yeah, it definitely serves an internal purpose as well.
Not to add more work maybe to your plate, but maybe every quarter there's a summary. You guys sort of put together here are the common issues, here are the common threads that we're seeing from sponsors, not necessarily a report, but maybe a discussion about issues or successes, you know, that sponsors are having that you guys are seeing, you know.
How to build up that, just even to summarize commonalities of negative, positive, you know, issues, just to say, well, you know, asphalt issues or aluminum issues or things like this that have been seen in reports might be helpful, but again, it might just be reiterating what everybody knows.
Yeah, and I think we've always kind of thought that either annual or maybe quarterly summary would be good. One of the things that kind of hindered that, I think, is that we're not always confident that we're getting all the updates. So, you know, to say a percentage or something like that may not be totally accurate, but it certainly could be done for, you know, the projects that we know that we're getting consistent updates.
Jacob, I think your spreadsheet is very well detailed. It provides good deliverables and milestones. I think, you know, I would encourage people to also use it as a workflow outline. I almost see it as a benefit that if somebody's a first-time tip recipient and it's their first experience, just potentially encouraging them to meet with you or CDTC staff to go over what each one of those columns may mean, because it's a lot of detail there, but it gets you from start to finish. So I'm viewing that while it tracks the milestones, it really is the foundation for a workflow too for a local sponsor.
The first column, SLA signed, is a 3-month process.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not that simple. Oh, yeah, I signed it. No.
Yeah.
Right, there's steps in between.
Oh, yeah.
You can do an organization just on that spreadsheet for any new tip recipient.
Yeah, I agree with John. It's one of our best tools in our planner's toolbox here. It's a great leap forward. Project website links is a new column. It's good information too.
Okay.
So we've come a long way in just a few years. It's great progress noted. Any other thoughts around the table? Online?
No, I think, yeah, I mean, for now then, I'm gonna keep moving with the way that we've been doing it. And as usual, I'll let you know who I'm reaching out to. So this next month, be sending emails to City of Saratoga, Saratoga County, and Village of Green Island. So keep an eye out for an email from me requesting those updates.
Schedule's too busy. I can't report anything.
Make that one easy then.
Noted. Good.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks, Jacob. 5 F Foxtrot at 11:35. We got CDTC planning activities.
Oh, actually, yeah.
I missed Greg. I missed Greg.
In the interest of time,
Greg,
basically,
yeah,
we
that's
have a few
sorry.
changes and just no bring up another handout since not much has changed. It's kind of scheduled lately, so we're good.
Any questions for Greg? Great opportunity here. We'll get planning activities up next. Thank you.
I have stuff
Anything
for
else,
that.
Anything else? Okay. Very good. Now we're CDTC. This is 5G on your agenda. Sandy.
Great, thanks, Steve. So, you know, as you could tell that we don't have anything going on here. I'm kidding. No, we do, you know, the status of planning activities is in your packet, cataloging the status of each linkage project, our regional consultant and other planning work, as well as our technical assistance program. The bus lane feasibility study is going to have a public outreach process beginning October 18th. So we'll be looking for flyers about that. That's going to be a regional effort. The one thing I wanted to mention was about our staffing changes. You know, in addition to myself becoming executive director here, so I still have to fill my own position. Jordan Solano Reed has left us to take a position in New York City for New York City DOT. So we're happy for him. And in addition, Glenn Pasca is retiring. His last day of work will be October 15th. So I just wanted to thank Glenn. Upwards of 40 years of service to CDTC, managing IP, managing our IT. I just wanted to wish him well. And thank you.
A round of applause for Glenn. Great work. Well, Thank you, Sandy. Okay, any questions? Moving forward, onward, and upward. Status of planning activities. First up is Mark on the Regional Planning Commission. Mark?
Hey, how you doing? We at CDRPC were able to process the release of the redistricting data for the decennial census. It's located on our website, cdrpc.org/census. You'll be able to see a mapping visualization that includes all municipalities and census tracts and notes the changes in race and some demographic characteristics that were released in the redistricting data. So, it's a pretty powerful visualization. There are a number of them. And we have a couple other visualizations on there that show where growth has been happening in the Capital District over the last 10 years. A couple big takeaways from the 2020 census is that our region is getting more diverse. And that is a function of a couple factors. One is how the census changed how they asked the question about race and ethnicity. And two, in migration from outside countries is my other opinion. Also, I will note that the remainder of the 2020 decennial census data, which was originally scheduled to be released on September 30th, has been delayed, and the new timeline is quote unquote tentatively 2022. So we'll have to wait a little bit more time to get that data out there. But I would encourage you to check out the visualizations on our website. And for some legacy information on the ACS census data, American Community Service data, as a reminder, check out capitalregionindicators.org. We will endeavor to pull in the 2020 decennial census data into that tool so you can compare it to historic trends, and how the region's been progressing over time. I'm also pleased to announce that the Regional Planning Commission has received a $1.2 million grant from the Department of Environmental Conservation for administration of the Climate Smart Community program. Similar to the Clean Energy Communities program, we will be deploying outreach coordinators to assist communities with a variety of tasks to get communities designated as climate smart communities, and also pursue other grant funding related to that program. While not specific to CDRPC, I will mention to the other planners and local officials around the table that the New York Planning Federation and the upstate chapter of the American Planning Association are hosting a conference throughout the month of October that features probably about 12 webinar sessions on a variety of topics, including regulating short-term rentals, anticipating changes that we would need to anticipate for regulating recreational marijuana, and other timely topics. So I would encourage you to check it out, newyorkupstateplanning.org for more details. Thank you.
Those are all professional credits for your degree.
Yeah, all sessions are eligible for CM credits for AICP planners and for required training credits for planning and zoning board members.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, good plug. Excellent program. Any questions for Mark at Regional Planning? Thank you for the census update. I don't know if we interest. Anything else? Moving forward. Next up is CTA. Is Ross Farrell still with us? Ross?
Melissa is here today.
I touched base with
Oh, you
Ross
are.
this
That's
morning.
yeah, thank you.
So we're happy to report that ridership has increased in the last month. We're close to 90% our normal levels, and a lot of that due to new relationships with OGS and the local school districts where we're now providing transportation. So all of that started late August, early September. So we're happy to see the increase.
Thank you, Melissa. Any questions for Melissa on the CTA updates? Plus is going well.
Yes.
Okay. It's there. Next up. Hey.
All right.
Where's Bob?
Bob is out of the country today.
Oh.
So far, we recently made the bid openings for Sitterly Road. It came in within thousands of dollars of our estimate at $6.3 million.
Good job.
That should be heading to award and everything to get that current situation replaced. The other one was the I-890 viaduct over Erie Boulevard and over there by GE. That project had an estimate of 11.2 million and came in at 8.5. So we had saw some significant bid savings, which was welcome on that project. The last thing I want to mention is transition to SFS, the statewide financial system, still ongoing. I know that this has been a learning curve for municipal sponsors. We've been using the past 6 months to try to train everyone on how to get their payment requests spot on, because we used to help change, fix them for them. They need to be spot on to go into SFS. The deadline for municipalities to submit them themselves is sort of moved because of the training efforts that are going on. But do please stay tuned. If you see anything with SFS on it, please get it to the people that are doing your billing to us. And have them take the training, videos, the town hall meetings, or whatever training comes down the pike. Please pass it to, it says SFS on it, even though it calls you all a vendor, it says, dear vendor, SFS, blah. Please get it. Everyone is being treated as a vendor since you're submitting bills to get paid. So anything SFS related, please get to whoever is submitting your payment request to our office. Can only help.
What is the terminal?
Varies.
Just a future reference.
The thing on the front end is it takes many more volleys back and forth to get this payment request correct. So there's a long time frame of submit it, wait, there's errors, send it back. There's errors, send it back. And once it's right, then the turnaround, I would say, is 6 weeks. They're trying to get that time down, but right now 6 weeks-ish. Once it's right, it just takes a long time to get it right.
And that's your DOT staff entering into SFS. In the future.
In the future, sponsors have to put it in SFS themselves.
Yeah.
So that's the transition that was supposed to happen October 1st. We're still-
Any questions for Greg Wixer, DOT? Hearing none, we can move forward to Thruway. Thank you, Greg. Thruway Authority is the fourth up. Is Tim Wainwright on the line previously? Anyone else from Thruway Authority? Hearing none. Who's next? Airport Authority. Me? Okay. All right. Thanks so much. We are continuing our post-pandemic recovery slowly. Still about 75 to 80% of passenger enplanements at the airport. Cargo's way up though, still exceeding even the national averages at Albany, at least 12% above 2019 and prior periods for air cargo, air freight. And this is difficult to track, but we do have good data on scheduled flight carriers, mostly FedEx and UPS with their jumbo jet wide body service daily, 7 days a week. On project planning, we're proceeding with a major improvement proposal for the terminal to expand that narrow pedestrian bridge from the north garage into a very large meter greeter concession area. It's in planning, so we're hoping to advance that to adopt the new paradigm of queuing and social distancing in the future with ballpark $50 to $60 million terminal expansion there, believe it or not, over all 6 lanes of the curbside access road. There'll be a second level structure there. So that is exciting news. On the air side, advancing new state-of-the-art security and a lot of asphalt. Right now, Reifenberg is doing the 8,500 foot primary taxiway alpha. Will be completed by this December and this season for asphalt. And we're programming the crosswind runway system 1028 for next year. This is about a $6 million project, the asphalt rehab. So that's a quick update. The master plan is advancing, and we'll have regional advisory and technical advisory meetings in about 6 to 8 weeks time frame. The CHA team with Gensler is advancing all our forecasting. So that's another exciting first and 20-year master plan for the airport, just in time for all our post-pandemic recovery. Any questions on airport service? Thank you for flying Albany.
Did I ask a
Liz?
question?
Yeah.
Who governs or is over county airports?
Our airport is an independent
Yeah, no,
Albany County Airport Authority, 7
right,
bipartisan members established by statute of 1993.
but.
County airports would usually be county government, but ours is
Yeah, but they're not
independent.
included in, CDTC,
Steve is our representative.
okay.
right. And
For
Port
the
Authority, Port Authority, our regional water, marine shipping port, and the airport were added to this committee under John Foreman circa 1993.
Okay. No, I was just wondering, because, what's happening in smaller airports, it was just, we don't know that.
Good point. There are over 4,000 airports in the country, about 400 of which, 1/10 of the total, are scheduled service airports. Albany ranks at about 70 to 80. It's always fluctuating with national, based on passenger claimants. So we're ranked in the top 100 well, ahead of Syracuse and Rochester, just a little smaller than Buffalo because they're a Toronto reliever airport and scheme of airport movements. So we are the largest upstate, second only to Buffalo, and except also Long Island, ISO smaller. JFK and LaGuardia, of course, much larger airports under the bi-state
No,
Port
I mean,
Authority.
it's useful to hear, your reports, I just wonder, we don't.
Reliever airports, we don't hear from Schenectady or Saratoga Airport, or reliever airports, Albany with no scheduled service.
Okay.
Glens Falls, Warren County. County-owned facilities that provide general aviation, non-scheduled service to the business community. Life flight, medical services are very important. Time is critical for many emergency conditions, of course. And the Scotia Air Base is
So
a military
who
facility.
funds when they make improvements on a county airport?
Under FAA jurisdiction,
Okay.
airports are the last remaining federal set-aside fund, which are fueled by aviation fuel taxes and passenger, every passenger ticket, there's fine print, under passenger tax. So passenger
All those add-ons.
taxes
Yeah.
and fuel taxes support aviation as the last remaining dedicated fund in the federal DOT pot.
Okay.
So we are still, scheduled service airports are all self-sustaining. But critical to our survival is good intermodal connections to both our freight facility off Route 7, and more importantly, exit 3 to the terminal. The airport connector was very critical. Thank you, state support. Anyway, did I answer your question, Liz?
Yeah.
Great question. I don't know how we can address the general aviation small airports
Yeah,
better.
the
for
distinction
information.
really was the scheduled passenger service.
Right.
It's the only airport in our region that has
That's
scheduled passenger
scheduled.
service.
Only scheduled service in the upper Hudson
Right.
estuary, south of Plattsburgh, lower Champlain Valley also. So our nearest scheduled service would be Bradley in Connecticut,
Newburgh.
Newburgh to the south,
Right.
and Syracuse to the west.
Right.
Dutchess County no longer has scheduled service, Utica has no scheduled service. So thanks for the question. Well done.
Steve, just building on that. real
Andrew.
quick. Is there any consideration or any of railroad spur to service the commodities that come in? Or is it strictly trucking out once stuff comes
Your
in?
question's on rail?
Yeah.
Rail
Integrated rail.
connections to the airport?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Minneapolis, St. Paul, raised here at this table a few times, a great paradigm with light rail. Light rail is one of those post-tip projects that Bus Plus took the place of, or maybe it's a stepping stone to future light rail in our region. But
I'm working
there are
on
other paradigm
commodities.
metropolitan areas of similar size that do have light rail connections to as intermodal.
You're
and to
speaking more about
aviation.
the freight.
The freight.
Right, yeah.
Freight
like
aspect.
freight
Yeah,
connection.
so
It's
it's all
marine
trucking.
and highway, rubber tires still dominant. But for time critical area is key. And we're always trying to promote that. Our jumbo jets are flying half empty. Full disclosure, every day, there are two or three scheduled flights with Boeing 757 wide body jets, they're half empty. This is a good point, an opportunity for future growth.
There's not a lot of intermodal freight that goes from air to rail because air is generally the most valuable and most time sensitive. And rail is generally the lower value, less time sensitive. So there's not a lot of, those two circles don't usually cross over.
Book rate versus first class.
Like that.
Good question, good keep around. Thank you. Who's next? Is Tony Basso with us?
It's not.
Oh, Tony, you got
was.
pressing priorities. He was with us earlier. I know it's exciting times at the Port of Albany as well, a lot of free growth there.
Things happening at work.
They did a property acquisition, and they're expanding the port. So there's expansion and growth at the Port of Albany. New counts, Tony was with us earlier. Any other questions or updated meeting schedule is October 12th, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, October 20th for the bus lane feasibility study public workshop on the 20th. Our next committee, planning committee is November 3rd. That motion to adjourn. Second, thank you all for taking time and joining us today. Stay well.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you. 152.
Very
If
short
you were
meeting.
worried about that having a presentation.